this session of our, we're recording, of our special learning series that's designed for certified service enterprise organizations, as well as members of the Points of Light Global Network. My name's Tracy Latos-Smith. I'm a consultant for Points of Light with the Service Enterprise Program. I'm joined by Sarah Jane Foltz, who's the Director of Capacity Building for Points of Light. And we're really excited to be offering these live webinars with the opportunity to ask questions and engage with our presenters as an exclusive benefit of Certified Service Enterprise Organizations and the Global Affiliate Network. As you saw, we're also recording the session, and we may post the recordings to the Points of Light community at some point in the future. So just want to let you know about that. So today's session is the volunteer engagement life cycle, skills-based and high commitment level volunteer management. And today will be facilitated by Sandra Fryer and Fong Lei from Arizona State University's Lodestar Center for Philanthropy and Nonprofit Innovation. So I want to tell you a little bit about Sandra and Fong. Sandra started her 30-plus year career in the nonprofit sector with St. Mary's Food Bank Alliance. Her experience includes logistics, program evaluation, strategic planning, process improvement, volunteer and staff management, project management, as well as grant writing and management experience. In 2012, Sandra joined the staff at Experience Matters, which I have to say my father in Arizona has done some work with you all, I think. This is a Phoenix-based nonprofit that connects skills and talented, the skills-based volunteers with with social benefit organizations, with nonprofit organizations to enhance capacity and solve community problems. And Fong grew up in Central Mesa, Arizona, is obsessed with starships and equality. So those are two very important things. Fong is a devoted public servant and a multi-term AmeriCorps and Vista volunteer, and is particularly proud of having engaged and worked alongside hundreds of other volunteers. Fong has worked in refugee resettlement, instruction and curriculum development, digital and media marketing, and autonomous driving. So lots to learn from these two. We're clearly in really good hands. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sandra and Fong for our session. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Tracy. We're really glad to be here today and spend the next hour with you. As you saw in the description, this is a very interactive workshop. So we really going to get you to talk to each other, and I hope you're prepared for that, because you will have to unmute and preferably also go on camera if your situation at all allows it. So as a precursor, before we go any further, we will be spending some time in breakout sessions in this interactive workshop. I'm gonna start sharing my screen here. Tracy had mentioned, let's see, you should see my slide. I have a thumbs up if you start to see the PowerPoint. Okay, fantastic. As Tracy has mentioned, I spent the last decade with Experience Matters. Experience Matters has now become a suite of programs under the ASU Lodestar Center for Philanthropy and Nonprofit Innovation. And as Experience Matters programs, we are engaging people that are 50 years and older in meaningful volunteer opportunities across the nonprofit sector with the goal to build stronger, more vibrant communities with deeper social ties. This originally started with the baby boomers, who were back then the strongest cohort and the best educated cohort. As most of you may know, the Gen Y is now turning 50 daily, and I think the millennials have surpassed the boomers as the most educated generational cohort. And talking about these generational cohorts and the benefits of engaging this organization would take too much time today to get into too deep into details. And it's probably an opportunity for another workshop down the road. What we want to cover today is we wanted to explore the stages of volunteer engagement. And when we say stages of volunteer engagement, we don't mean necessarily the process, you kind of mean the experience that the volunteer and the supervisor or mentor is going through during an assignment of a skill-based volunteer. We will spend time in breakout sessions, as I had mentioned. We always feel the wisdom is in the room, and while we have best known methods and practices, there's probably some things that we haven't charted down yet, or that is in the room on experience and knowledge that we haven't tapped into. So we always want to utilize the people in the room. And then, of course, we want to re-examine and look at these best known methods for volunteer engagement in this area. If you are a certified social enterprise, you should or may remember this slide from the curriculum of the training program and are very familiar with what a good volunteer process looks like and recognize what kind of standards you want to set. What we're doing today and talking about today is really an overlay when it comes to onboarding and supervision of volunteers in this process of good volunteer engagement as a process. So just to kind of tie in with the curriculum and where this falls if you're training agencies. We had the chance back in 2016 to partner with encore.org and Intel and placed 200 Intel retirees into 6 to 12 months, 6 to 12 month, 1,000 hour projects across the nonprofit sector as kind of a bridge here from the work environment into retirement. And we really were able to confirm what some of the research has showed us and what we had learned in other skill-based engagement situations, that there is, it's not the question if they're going to hit these stages, it's more the question when, and the supervisors as well as the volunteers seem to experience that. So we decided to really start doing training to agencies and training to volunteers around these areas in preparing them better for the assignment and learning them to navigate, teaching them to navigate the waters as they hit these rough spots because they had been talked about and they had been better prepared. When we did these workshops, we did them in a live setting. So what we're talking about today and what we're doing today, since many of you are already very familiar with the service enterprise process and the curriculum and what good processes look like, this is really some materials that you might want to take back to train some of your agencies or your volunteers, or that may spur some ideas of how you can improve your onboarding process and your supervision process at your agencies to reach the desired outcomes. And what this was based on, again, is really these are skill-based volunteers that bring their lifetime of experiences with them, and really we're often doing project-based volunteer assignments, like if you want to implement a new volunteer software, do the research, do the need assessment, and then do the data migration, those kinds of projects. So really a specific skill that the agency was incorporating and that they didn't have on staff or couldn't afford to pay for. What we had found is that often, and you know this from your assignments and from experience you have had, we are enthusiastic beginners, right? We are fascinated by the new assignment. We have thoughts like, as a volunteer, we have thoughts like, oh, for so long, I worked for somebody else's bottom line. Now I get to make a difference. This is an organization that is so aligned with what's tugging on my heart. As the supervisor, you may be thinking, I've been wanting to do this project forever. I'm so excited to bring somebody on board that has these skills, and we're already thinking about how we can keep this person and what project they can do next. And so we're super excited. And this is kind of where the challenge is, how do we keep this excitement? What can curb the excitement? One example is the nonprofit sector is very different from the corporate world. We make decisions slower. We have more consensus building. That maybe we have less resources. We can can't just buy a new computer software or something. So that may be frustrating to the volunteer. And so we are now would like to spend some time in our first breakout session. So I really encourage you, we'll assign you randomly. I really encourage you to introduce to each other and kind of tell each other who you are, where you're from, and then think about what could curb your enthusiasm. If you don't have the experience on the volunteer basis, you probably have it starting at a new school, at a new college experience, or maybe a new employment experience. That those all often follow the same patterns we have observed with these skill-based volunteers. So Fang, if you would like to activate the breakout session, and we'll send you off, have a fun conversation, and we'll see you in about 6 minutes. Okay, you should hear me now, and I hope you can hear me clear. There was some problems in the breakout room, but I think you all can hear me, so that's great. Now I need, am I still sharing my screen on your end? No. Okay, so we need to reshare screen. It's a learning experiment. There we go. Now you should see the screen again, right? Still not?
Now we see your notes. So I think you shared the wrong screen.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time. I can sort of hear you, but it's not clear.
Okay. It's not very clear. Okay. I'll try to speak up. I don't know if there's too much of an echo or, but hopefully we get through okay. All right. So what could curb the enthusiasm? I hope you had a good time in the breakout session. If you could give us some feedback in the chat, if that was too long, too short. Obviously, it took a minute to get in, so we had less time. So hopefully the next breakout session, we have those bumps behind us and it goes really smooth. If you didn't have a chance to introduce yourself to each other, please do so in the next session. Does anybody want to share one of the experiences they had or something that they really thought was important to think about that could curb the enthusiasm that a supervisor or a volunteer initially has?
Well, I'll share an awesome point that Caitlin brought up of how we don't always know how long these projects are going to take. And if a volunteer's project ends, what's the expectation of jumping them right into something else where they might not be the right fit for that project versus saying, hang on a month, we're going to have another thing coming to you. So I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. We have had the experience that one of the challenges was the opposite, that we're starting to talk about what all else that volunteer could do for us, and then the actual statement of work goes out the window. But we talk about that a little bit more as we go further into the discussion. So some of the best known methods that we found across the board was very important is obviously onboarding is critical. But onboarding is not just one day. It really needs to keep the person engaged and busy for, it depends on the assignment. Let's just use the example, the person comes twice a week for 4 hours and to work on a certain assignment. And it's really important that for the first couple of weeks until staff gets to know them and they get to know staff, that they stay really busy during that time. Even if they have an assignment, if you just stick them behind the computer and do virtual training for 4 hours, that is probably going to curb the enthusiasm a little bit. It is very important that staff understands from the board of directors, volunteers and staff know why they're there and what they're doing. As a service enterprise, we do know that volunteers are important to us, but that doesn't necessarily mean why is this volunteer here? And if it's a skill-based volunteer, he, she, them may come into our office and ask us questions. And we're like, why are you poking around in my department, for example, right? And so it's very important that the staff, that they get introduced during, if you have all staff meetings, that staff knows why they're there, that they will engage with them. And another thing we found is that staff gets threatened. They feel like that they may call them on the carpet, or that they may lose their job, or that they will be replaced by a volunteer. And so it's very important when we're talking about that service enterprises reduce cost and increase effectiveness and efficiency. Reducing cost is not that the staff is gone and the volunteer is sliding in their place. For the culture and the morale, that is another very important point. The other point is, what training should the volunteer have and what training should the supervisor have to be ready for this assignment? We touched on this a little bit at the beginning. There's generational differences. So talking about maybe having training around that. There's communication styles that are different, right? So it's important to have that training of the different communication styles, so the volunteer and the supervisor then can talk about how they should communicate with each other where it works for both of them. So, and obviously, if the supervisor is really busy, does the supervisor need to assign a buddy or a mentor? So the volunteer technically reports to the supervisor, but at the first 60 days, all of a sudden there's another project that popped up that supervisor hadn't on his plate or her plate. And all of a sudden there is not enough time. If you let that volunteer float, he'll get very frustrated because the project's not moving forward. And so assigning a mentor or a buddy is also a good method in that case. And then when we talk about service enterprise in the process, we always talk about job description and treating it like a volunteer human resource. But job description is different than a statement of work. A job description just talks about what we want to do. The statement of work has the goals and the deliverables and the commitments to each other and what it entails to reach that goal. Since the volunteer is skill-based and has the expertise, it's important to do that together and involve the volunteer, and especially during the first 60 days, listen to the volunteers. But that co-created statement of work is your anchor, because that's what, when you get fuzzy on the goals and what you're measuring, that will keep you, that's probably more your rudder than your anchor, because you want to stay flexible and things change and you may have to adjust. But you come back to that statement of work, and as always, it's better to have a plan and change the plan than not have a plan at first. But it's really critical that the volunteer is heard in the creation of the plan, because we're bringing the person in as an expert. And so we want to value their opinion, how this best is done. Inevitably, the honeymoon will end regardless how well you onboard a volunteer and how well you develop the statement of work together, and there will be second thoughts. This could be, again, because the supervisor is overwhelmed and may think, oh my gosh, I wasn't ready for that. I thought I was ready. Now it's becoming too much. The volunteer needs too much of my attention. I didn't think I would get pulled in so much. There may be office culture. The volunteer may think they don't know me here. They don't respect me. The volunteer may have been a very important person in their previous career, and now they're just somebody coming in every once in a while, and people barely know his or her name. So those kind of things. So we would like to send you back in your breakout rooms and explore what can cause those second thoughts. Did you have those experiences? Why did you have them? And then also, how could it have been prevented? What could have been done differently? So if you just let fun start us back up in the breakout rooms and enjoy your conversation and get to know each other a little better.
Sandra, the room that was lucky enough to have you last time. Yes,
Okay,
please.
welcome back, everybody. I think we have everybody back in the main room. What I wanted to mention is, I think I said at the beginning that we really did this workshop in a live setting pre-COVID. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a background how we did these breakout sessions in the live setting. In the live setting, we would have done with the first breakout session, we would have done a think, pair, share, which means however the people are sitting, they would have introduced each other to somebody next close to them. They would have thought about the question for a minute or so, maybe take down a note, and then introduce themselves to somebody that's sitting close by that they don't know, and then have a similar discussion like you had in your breakout room. For the second session, we would have split the room and would have said, this side of the room, think about the question from the side of the agency, and this side of the room, think about the question from the perspective of the volunteer, and then give them, like we did in the breakout rooms, 5-6 minutes. You know, when you're in a room, you can feel the pulse much better. Do they need a little bit longer? Should we cut it shorter? You have that flexibility because you see everybody and you're walking around the room, kind of listening in what they're sharing. And then like here, we would have them report out from the agency perspective and the volunteer perspective. So I would love for one or two of you to give me a little bit, or us, for all of us, a little bit of a story, something you just discussed in the breakout room from the agency perspective, from the supervisor perspective, that caused second thoughts. Is there anybody who would like to raise their hand for that? Okay, nobody wants to share from that perspective. How about from the volunteer perspective? Does somebody have a good example of what caused second thoughts from the volunteer perspective that would be beneficial for the group to hear about? Or that was like, oh, I didn't think about that one, kind of like Holly said earlier, that there was a good point made about thinking about the next assignment and how to continue to engage them. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Tish. You're going to have to unmute yourself, please.
I'll share. I can't handle awkward silence, so. What I was thinking of is I've been in both positions. I've been a volunteer and I have been an executive director and a director of operations. So I've had to manage volunteers and have been a volunteer. And so for me, always having, you know, when a volunteer shows up and they don't have anything to do, there's no plan for them, I feel like they will be very much discouraged. And even if you do, you know, have, oh, well, you kind of are throwing something together on the fly, I feel like even that is not a very good way to lead those volunteers, and they will feel like they are an afterthought and will be really discouraged. And so what I would often try to do is have like a contingency list of things that were like a go-to if there wasn't any administrative work or like an assignment or a project for them, that I have this go-to list that I can say, oh, awesome, well, here, these are things we never get to, and we would love for you to help with these. And then they feel like it's still an assignment and that they are not an afterthought.
Great, very well, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so some of the challenges is definitely if the volunteer feels disconnected, right? If the staff doesn't understand why I'm here, I feel like I'm not heard, or I was supposed to have an email address last week and I still don't have an email address, and I don't want to use my personal address and have all that junk, not junk, all this project stuff show up in my personal email. Those kind of things. So really being ready for them. If we were in a very virtual environment the last couple of years, but if there's somebody who's really coming to the office, that they have the resources they need to fulfill their assignment. So if desk phones are going away, but if they need access to a computer, if they need access to certain files, make sure that shared file is mapped to their computer is ready. Those kind of things will really help. We all probably have, and again, as I said earlier, keeping them busy, keeping them, so they don't have a chance to sit there and think, what did I just do to myself? And so that day, I'm going to start sharing my screen again too, so that they can move forward with their assignment. And the other thing that's very important is setting expectations. We talked a little bit about communication styles could be something that's important to talk about. If you need them in the office versus working at home, or is it okay to work at home part-time and come into the office part-time for this project? What does that look like? Just setting the expectations really early, mutual candor of both the volunteers and the supervisor. How do we report progress? Are there certain meetings that the volunteer absolutely should attend that are not optional because of the role? And how frequently is that? Who all should be involved in this project? Again, making sure those people know what the volunteer is doing. Reviewing the organizational culture, rules, and requirements up front, so there is no surprises there. And if there is a decision-making protocol, making sure that's clearly communicated, because again, if this volunteer was very autonomous or higher up in their organization before, they're not used to going through the proper channels, so to speak, or they may simply not know what the proper channels are. I just transitioned from Experience Matters, a very small nonprofit, to ASU Lodestar, a university. I was very conscious about, I don't even know who to ask and what question should I ask when it comes to processes, right? So all those things that we probably have experienced when we change jobs are very true for the skill-based volunteer. It is not uncommon, and I come back to the statement of work. And when I changed my wording from anchor to rudder, because it's not uncommon to fine tune and tweak the original statement of work. And the work can easily expand beyond the project. So we really need to be careful to not get the scope creep, so to speak, and get too far out of what we really wanted to accomplish, because then we have the feeling we're not moving forward. And unless we truly need to make a shift because the environment has shifted. Bumps are certain. They're gonna come, but how we navigate them is key. And as with so many things, it's communicate. Keep those lines open. Make sure you have time for your volunteer, especially during the first 60 days until they really have their legs under them. Again, if you don't have time, find a buddy, find a mentor, but there needs to be somebody they know they can go to when they need to move forward or when they have a question. And again, we talked about what kind of training. Is there cultural training necessary because of the people that you serve, or is there the nonprofit sector itself? Again, the nonprofit sector is the third sector and a big sector, but it's different than the other two sectors. It's different than public and a corporation. And what are those differences? And do we need to have those conversations with the volunteer early on? Once we get through that and we navigate that, there's typically there's two paths or one path, or the volunteer may go from one area, and the supervisor from one area, from one path to the other, and it may weave back and forth several times. One of those is the cautious contributor. And the characteristics of that, it is a skill-based volunteer who has the knowledge and skills to do the work, but they may have doubts on completing the task without direction. They may have been in an environment where they were very strictly directed because of policies or other things, and they may be very nervous to overstep the lines. So it could be quite the opposite of the person that's making decisions without following the protocol. Self-doubt around the ownership of the skill-based volunteer project and how much agency they have in this project. Not feeling like they're making a difference. All the skill-based volunteers we've placed always said that making a difference was their key motivator. And they sometimes didn't really care about what the cause of the nonprofit was. They just wanted to serve and make a difference and feel like they're making a difference. Both the volunteer or the supervisor are doing what they can to make it work, but it's just not flowing very well. Or the environment has changed. And the significantly, like with COVID, right? That certainly would have upset the apple cart. Or the supervisor may have left, and the new supervisor coming in doesn't know anything about the project. The volunteer has the feeling that nobody's advocating for them. They're just floating out there. Or the budget has changed, and we had the resources for this project, and now we're scrambling because we no longer have the resources. All those could be some of the characteristics of the cautious contributor. The peak performer on the other day is productive, engaged, they know what they're doing, they feel good about what they're doing, they're getting positive feedback, they think I am making a difference. That is really, again, I can't say that enough, that's why they're there. The challenges here are, I want to do more, and I can do so much, I can make a difference here, and I can help you there. And all of a sudden there is the scope creep again in the project. And it becomes difficult to manage the hours that are assigned for the project because the volunteer is so excited and wants to engage in so many different things. So we want to do around this cautious contributor and this peak performer, we want to do another breakout session with you. This time, it's important that you pay attention to the name of your group that you're assigned to. If you don't see the name when you're going in, if you hover your mouse over the Zoom logo symbol, it will show you. You'll have 4 groups. There will be the volunteer cautious contributor and the agency cautious contributor. And they will be thinking about why did we get to this stage and how can we get out of it to go into the peak performer. And there will be a volunteer peak performer and an agency peak performer group. And they will be thinking about what happened to get to the stage and how can we stay here? How do we keep it here and don't slip into the cautious contributor mindset and situation? So again, when we open the breakout sessions, you will see the name. We will post the overall question again, but it will be a summary of both questions, so, since we can split that up. So if you are uncertain what group you're in it, hover your mouse over the logo and it should display the name. It should say volunteer/peak performer, for example. So we'll send you off again for another 5-6 minutes and see you back here and try the discussion.
Welcome back, Holly. Michelle. Oh, I missed Polly in my window. Welcome back, Polly. May I ask, MAVA, what's that an acronym for?
MAVA is the Minnesota Alliance for Volunteer Advancement, and we are the Service Enterprise Hub for Minnesota. And my colleague Holly Daniels is on the call as well. So yeah, we're the Minnesota folks up in the Great White North here.
Wow, great to have you here. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Okay, I think we have everybody back. Looks like. Great. So, cautious contributor. I hope you found out easily which group you were in, and I would love to hear from the volunteer perspective of a cautious contributor, if one person could share with us.
This is Polly, and Michelle and I were talking about the volunteer side of the cautious contributor equation. And one thing we came up at the end of our conversation is that sometimes the staff person that works with volunteers might come into the equation later, after the project's been scoped, or the volunteer manager has been developing it. And I think it would be important, and we talked about the importance of maybe bringing people together and leveling the playing field, so that, the volunteer is introduced as a skill-based volunteer, but the staff is also introduced in terms of their expertise, their experience, how they can support that volunteer, how the volunteer's skills and experience can complement what, that staff supervisor's working on, what the team's working on. So just the idea of like making sure in terms of communication that people understand the context a little better. And that might help people step forward to say like, oh, now I understand where my skills fit, and that's so I can be more excited about contributing.
Great, well, thanks for sharing that. And I would have loved to hear from the others, but we are running out of time. So I'm gonna run through the rest very quickly here. I hope I shared the right screen. Let me share again.
It looks good.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, so we will send a handout to give you the best known practices and methods in writing as a follow-up, because we are running out of time and we have to wrap it up. But the key takeaway really is to keep the conversation open, to keep checking in with each other, to encourage the volunteer to come early on when there is encouragement, to make sure we can get back on track and stay at that peak performer level. And again, rather than listing all the best known practices, we will send them out in writing to you as a follow-up for the sake of time today. In the live setting, we would have counted out on 4s. So we would have just had counted down the row, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the 1s in this corner, all the 2s in this corner, 3s here, 4s here, and then made the 4 groups in that way, and have them, they would have had a flip chart to kind of make some notes, and then come back together, report out, and really use the wisdom of the room to expand on the concepts. But just to quickly recap, volunteer onboarding is critical. So you guys know that, but keep in mind what we said about this additional training and really listening to the skill-based volunteers. Developing the statement of work together and then using it as your rudder. Being very upfront and have great candor around mutual expectations. Recognizing the needs to fine tune and tweak the statement of work at times as over the life of the project, it is not written in stone, life happens, things change. Then bumps will happen, communicate on both sides. That's a two-way street. And then have the conversations about what's next, but don't let that interfere with the current project and get scope creep. I thank you so much for your time. We will have to wrap it up here. I think I'm a couple minutes over, and this was now with the fire hose. But again, I promise we will follow up in writing. And thanks so much for contributing. Before we let you go, I believe Frank's posted in the chat. If not, he does so now. Or if you could please really quickly scan the code and give us a real quick, it's just a star system, like if you finish a WhatsApp call. Just give us your rating on this workshop. We would much appreciate it, and have a great day. We'll wrap it up with that. I'm sorry to have rushed you through so much at the end here. Thanks for being here. I hope this was of value.
Thank you so much, Sandra and Fong, and thanks to you all for being here. SJ will send out an email with a link to the recording and the handout that Sandra mentioned, and also registration for the upcoming webinars in this series. We've got 3 more remaining. The next one is on June 28th on strategic planning for volunteer engagement. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Tracy, do you mind standing on a minute? Do you have
Thanks, everybody.